Greetings and welcome to the Act React podcast. I'm Daniel Burkholder, a dance artist based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, and Potawatomi peoples. And I'm the host of this podcast. In this episode, I had the privilege of talking with Nina Martin, a true rebel in the dance world, and especially in the world of contemporary improvisation. Her work developing ensemble thinking has been vital to the clarification and advancement of improvisation within the contemporary dance field as a vital form of performance, research, and pedagogy. Her work with ReWire is also really inspiring as it has taken this kind of creative initiation and found its value as a therapeutic tool in practice. We dig into all of this in our conversation, as well as really only scratching the surface of all her amazing work. Before we start, here's Nina's bio. Nina Martin is a choreographer, pedagogue, dance theorist, and performer. Centered in the phenomena of perception, composition, and spontaneous movement states, her research springs from 50 years of embodied research and applied dance. Martin tours internationally, teaching and performing inspired by dance systems, ensemble thinking, and ReWire movement states, which complement her practice in contact improvisation. Martin is an artist member of the Lower Left Performance Collective, where cooperative inquiry is valued. Nina has served on the faculties of UCLA's Department of World Art and Cultures and New York University's Experimental Theater Wing, as well as guesting at colleges and universities across the states and in Europe, Asia, and Canada. She received 6 choreography fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts. She's presently the board president of Marfa Live Arts, which hosts the Dance Ranch Marfa workshops in Marfa, Texas. She is a professor of dance studies at TCU School for Classical and Contemporary Dance. And now, please enjoy my conversation with Nina. Well, good morning, Nina, and thank you so much for joining me on the Act React podcast. I'm really excited to have you here and for us to talk a little bit about improvisation.
My favorite topic.
The first, kind of the general first question that's very wide open that I've asked everyone is kind of like right now, these kind of present days, how does improvisation show up in your life, in your work, in your world?
Well, everywhere. My improvisational skills come to the fore in my everyday life, and I teach improvisation, and I think my improvisational skills has allowed me to navigate life, not accepting the unknown and understanding that it's not a deficit to not have the future known. So there's that. I teach it, and I teach a breadth of improvisational skills, and many of which people find transformative and not only helpful in their performance work, but in their life as well. So sort of nonverbal intelligence, and it serves. I work with business students, a lot of different quote unquote non-dance audiences, and
yeah. So I know there's lots of threads here that we can start pulling on, even just in that response. But I kind of want to maybe focus for a couple of moments on your performing, and then we'll probably come back into these other threads of teaching and the other ways that it shows up in your life. But maybe talk about like what value do you find in performing improvisationally, and even maybe a little bit, what does that even mean for you? Because it can mean so many different things in different contexts. What does it mean to perform improvisation?
I have a score that I practice, and it's called and go. So that I people pay their money, curtains up, and I don't have a plan, a forecast plan, but depend on the skills and the habits that I've developed to be able to spontaneously communicate and perform with people. And it's what I do now. I pretty much do and go. And I'm usually in an ensemble. And um, and there's something about that kind of work that I feel like it even has a political kind of impact, where people witness this ability to be real, and um, and problem solve in the moment. And so for me, performance is really important to develop your improvisational skills. I think actually performance is required for me to hone the phenomenon. Like, what is it to be with an audience in that state of spontaneously responding to the unknown?
Yeah. So you mentioned you've cultivated these skills and habits. What do you think of as kind of the essential skills that are necessary to be able to and go, right? To be able to do that, like to get to that place where you're able to then perform something that has coherency and all the things.
Yeah, I love that word. Does it cohere? So, um, well, what I have found very helpful is I have a solo practice, I have a duet practice, and I have an ensemble practice, because I think you need all those skills in the work that I'm interested in. And practicing all those together, plus you have to have people you're working with. I mean, you don't have to, right? I function in groups that don't know my particular work, so I can function there. But I also dance a lot with people who we've developed the work together, and it's it's a different experience when there's actually a language, so that intention I can read and understand and assume people have intention, so that I'm not witnessing some sort of wandering around, moving while somebody's trying to figure out what's going on. So just uh, getting a real sort of clean intention, so that I'm not wondering, does that person even have an intention, right? So that's a pleasure. Yeah.
So maybe honing in a little bit on the solo practice. What is, when you're doing the solo practice, like what is that practice and maybe talk a little bit about the goals of that practice. Like, what are the skills, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call them, competencies, I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Sure.
that are developing within that practice.
Um, I do something called articulating the solo body, and it borrows skills, practices, scores from other people, Barbara Daly or Deborah Hay. And I also do something called ReWire, movement states, which has been research into getting close, very close in time to almost, if you think about a thought as a desire. so that I can be as quick. I can't be as quick as my brain, but I can try and make a noble effort to be as quick as my brain, so that I'm dancing my brain and not, you know, having that delay of deliberation. So, you know, on the spectrum of deliberation, really trying to get to this pre-conscious state, which has been developed through practice to be that I can trust it.
Mm.
And we can't be in the moment totally, right? The science has told us that, the research there, because it's always a remembered present, which I forgot his name right now, Gerald. Anyway, he'll come to me, but he has a term, remembered present, and it's just that's my solo practice, and this ReWire movement state has really helped me do that, where I can, the planning mind, which we have a planning mind, it keeps us alive. So it's important that we can forecast the future. Can I get across the street before that car hits me? Yes, I think I can, but I got to go fast or whatever. Yeah, so just trying to get on like a nervous system level with my dancing, and yeah, that's what that's basically the research I've done, which ended up being extremely helpful for people with cerebral palsy, because it kind of is a nervous system reset, and there's two parts to it. There's the neuro part, where you're dancing brain to body, and then there's a kinesthetic part of it where you're doing from the body up. So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of my practice. Plus, the invite being seen, Deborah Hayes mantra. I think Mary Overly also used that a lot. And of course, Mary Overly was a mentor of mine. And so those kinds of things. Trisha Brown's score for Locus from, was that early 80s, something like that. But it's basically, how she used the Laban cube. She added some stuff to it, and then made a score from that. So, which gives you this really rich, complex vocabulary that if you train in there, if you train that ability to be spatial, or use spatial concepts with your dancing, it's incredibly fruitful. So I would say that that's pretty much where over many years my practice has come. And improvisational, in improvisation there can be this delay. There can be a delay, and a lot of people have, especially students, will, while they're trying to figure out what to do, they move, but they're not moving with intention. They're just moving so they can get the next idea. So I've worked really hard for me to, for my own dancing, that I don't go to that space of moving while waiting for the next idea. So I do something called image move, where I can just be clean in my dancing, and in my intention, and it helps. And then this is difficult, but then these images, these ideas can be engaged really fast, extended in time until the next idea, so that you kind of can take away that delay that happens in improv, where, in choreographed work, people work really hard to not have that. So it's something I've developed that is very, very helpful for me for my own dancing.
So I want to kind of like do the tangent and like talk about like how when working with students with these ideas, you know, and they're younger dancers, they're college dancers, they probably don't have a lot of experience with improv, and you're bringing some of these ideas in. How do you kind of offer them and kind of mentor them through the place where they can move from it being so like, again, they're just trying to move because they don't know what else to do, to being more intentional with like these images or with their movements?
Um, I had an article in the journal Dance Education where I used Deborah Hayes' invite being seen, the notion of problem solving, and then the the task and the task at hand, and it and stillness. So invite being seen, stillness, and problem solving. And so first off, to teach that stillness is doing something. It's not non-doing. It is a doing. And it's interesting and a very great resource. And then the invite being seen, where part of the thrill of watching improvisational work is the risk. I learned that really early on with contact because I realized it was a little bit like the Romans watching the Christians and the lions in the Colosseum, because when we fell on our ass, that was thrilling to the audience. They liked to see, oh, she didn't intend that. It happened to her. And I also realized, this is in the galleries in Soho in the 70s and 80s, that, I couldn't cover it. So I just had to be there. So this invite being seen that I use of Deborah Hayes' work is that real vulnerability. And so teaching that is really important, because they think they can kind of hide on and also hide in their movement. Like movement can sort of keep them from expressing what's really going on. And then what are you trying to do in this moment? What's the problem? And that's extremely helpful in getting people to understand stillness as vocabulary. Is very helpful. But I teach something called ensemble thinking for ensembles, and that it works incredibly well. That in a semester I can have them in ensembles thinking choreographically and bringing material back through, composing a piece in time and in a really very professional manner. So that's my main. But I also do, I'll teach them articulating the solo body, because basically they have their generic classroom moves, technique moves, as that's what dancing is. So the image move stuff and all of that gets them to be creative in their vocabulary. And so they have a solo practice, and then they can function in an ensemble. And in another semester, I teach them contact. So hopefully by the time they graduate, they've got, and they do write back to me and go, oh, I'm working with Crystal Pike right now, and thank you so much for all the skills you gave me, because a lot of choreographic practices are collaborative now. And what do you bring to the choreographer? So
Yeah.
so that's kind of the solo practice.
Yeah. 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 Of course. That's great. So maybe it's a good, I do want to talk, of course, about ensemble thinking and kind of lower left and that development of that work. And like kind of maybe talk a little bit about kind of the development of ensemble thinking. And again, I think you've already started touching on it, and we've kind of already touched on it, but kind of the nature of the goal of having like a form that you can kind of, this is what we're doing,
Hmm.
and and kind of the ways in which you work with a group to move more and more into performance, like the, so kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's the, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was in a group. Well, I got to New York in 76 and was performed with Simone Forti in the first couple of weeks. Very fortunate. And the people in that, it was the Planet piece at PS1, and Paul Langland was in there, and Wendell Beavers, and Danny Lepkoff, and Terry O'Reilly from Mabu Mines. Anyway, I was like, oh, these people, this is who I want to dance with. And so we were on, there was contact, right? There was contact. And we were in galleries performing and stuff like that. But uh, I was in a very fruitful collaboration with Channel Z, who are Danny Lepkoff, or Daniel Lepkoff, I think he's known now, um, Robin Feld, Diane Madden, Randy Warshaw, Stephen Petronio, and myself. Did I leave out anybody? And Paul England. So Paul was dancing in the daytimes and working with Meredith Monk. I was working with David Gordon. Danny was working with Steve, Randy, Stephen, and Diane were in the Trisha Brown Company, and Robin was really working to bring us together. And we really early on, we all were adept at contact, but the idea of it as a casual form, if for lack of a better word, so the natural body, um, hanging out on the sides, focus is on the dancing in the center. We challenged ourselves that a more theatrical framing of it. And if you could be seen, you were on. You know, you were working on. There's no like, I'm not on. I'm watching. Now I'm in. So I think that was kind of a major thing we did. And we worked every summer. We'd go and do a residency out in the countryside somewhere and just dance for a whole week together, and then once a week in town. And it was a really precious time because it didn't last terribly long, but it was just so rich. And of course, everybody was ambitious for a professional career in dance. So, but the granting agencies were saying, well, wait a minute, you're applying for, Stephen Petronio Dance Company, and you're applying for Channel Z funds. No, that's double dipping. We're not, and we couldn't convince them that these are separate areas of research. But so we eventually moved on. But what developed in that, from that work and videoing and sitting down and watching it and talking about it and performing um and before that research, I was improvising, and I'd kind of get off stage and go, I don't think that's it. Oh, that can't be it, can it? No, that doesn't seem this. No, this is not it. And we had Grand Union as a model. No, it's not a model for us. That's not a model for us. So yeah, and we were studying, Barbara Dilley's work, Mary Fulkerson's work, Nancy Toth's work. We were all also going, we didn't just go to contact class, right? We went, Mary Overly was doing solo, and the people I just mentioned were doing ensemble. And so we now it's like all that ensemble work kind of got very quiet, and contact is, supreme. With it still, I don't know where the research is in contact right now, but yeah. So this idea of like, wait, and then looking at improvisation and going, what are they doing? What are they doing? And just really challenging myself of what kind of work I wanted to do, and I appreciated in highly predetermined work that they, had been very refined compositionally. Whether you were interested in the work or not, that you could tell there was definite attention to that compositional work, which I missed in improvisational work. So I did a lot of teaching at Impulse Tanz in Vienna kind of twice a year, and I'd be given these big blocks of time, and started trying to develop a system that addressed this issue of thinking and doing. And so I'm really happy. And of course, so Channel Z was a big inspiration. And then I went on to always have an ensemble working. Well, I had Lock Time, Jennifer Keller, Johanna Meyer, Alexander Hartman, and then I ended up in San Diego, and we started Lower Left, which is in the lower left corner of California, and had these amazing collaborators, because I got to San Diego and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? It was a difficult dance community for me, because one thing is, I think a lot of people thought I didn't dance. That what I did wasn't dance. But Mary Wright, Jane Blount, and Karen Schaffman and I got together, and Gwen Ritchie was with us in the beginning too. And we said, what are we going to do here? And we created Lower Left and really developed a community of dance there. And collaboratively helped this research into ensemble thinking. So it's a multitude of voices and practitioners that have really developed it. And in fact, we just launched a certification program after like 10 years of talking about it. And Gwen Ritchie's, going through the certification for it. So it's really, I'm very fortunate that my interest in ensemble has also given me an enduring community.
So when you're working with Lower Left or another group that's learning or have, explore ensemble thinking, and you go into performance, curious, like, is it usually just and go? Is there any kind of scoring, whatever that means? And we can all, I know what that means. And then kind of like, what are your goals within those performances?
Right. I remember, I think it was Randy Warshaw, but at a PS 122 performance of ours, we often did a very composed first section, props, text, all sorts of things. And we knew, like a piece, an improvised piece. But second, I think I'm correct in saying this. Others might have another opinion, but I think Randy said, all right, I can't remember, first 40 seconds. Whatever you do in the first 40 seconds, that's what you have. And I call that an economy score, because often in improv, people are just generating. And, so that was a compositional idea, and open. And you could use everybody's material. And that was very helpful. And So I went on to develop this notion of economy, which forces you to not be like a kid in a toy store. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, look at that thing. Oh, and now look at this thing. With it where you're constantly going on to new things and not developing your material. So things like that were helpful. They were opened because sometimes scores are so restrictive that they're not creative. And so for me, a score has to be creative, and which means it has to have some sort of openness to it. Let's see, what was I going to say about that? Economy. Oh yeah. I mean, another score for an ensemble, which is extremely helpful and open, is max 3 foci. And, there's transitions and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, okay, check it out. Check out the space. 3 is a lot. Maybe 4, but, it's really hard to maintain 5, and so you can go in and join. So 20 people can be on stage, but you're understanding that there's, events happening. You can start a 4th one or a 5th one, and people have to either join or leave, or something has to happen. So we don't get up to 15 little pods, especially with contact, right? Little pods of which, that's also, you could see that as an ensemble score. It could work. But I just find it's really helpful for people to have a limit. But it doesn't mean that you're restricted. It's a pretty open restriction. We also practice extraction, where I depend on my ensemble to participate in my composition, and if let's say I'm doing something really interesting or whatever, but it's just too much going on. We got to clear out the space. You can be extracted. And you don't fight it, so often you see that. You don't fight it, and you thank the person that extracted you. Thank you for being eyes for me. And I can go back in.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can use a call like clear space, which means, okay, everybody off stage. But if you happen to be in something that you want to invest in, you can stay. So things like that kind of help people build some skill and an idea of what are we trying to do, and we're trying to make a dance, so.
Yeah. So these are great examples. I love these examples that kind of give insight into some of the ways in which you're offering ways to compose or frame or help people navigate right through the improvisational experience on stage. Because as you said, it is kind of like a heightened experience, and you are creating something that people are watching, and we're aware of that and all that kind of stuff. And then you mentioned contact improvisation earlier and kind of wanting to reframe that as less of a casual kind of dance, or natural, I guess was the word you used, natural. I always think of the difference between being in a jam and being on stage. Those are really different goals when you're doing contact improv. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit about, so we talked about the solo, we talked about ensemble a little bit, you mentioned contact, but maybe what's the value and importance of contact improvisation in the development of your work as both a performer and as a teacher?
Yeah. I'll just say, before talking about contact, that ensemble thinking is through a performance lens, which means that we do a lot of watching and describing, and we all have different aesthetics, but there is a big area where our visual systems work similarly. And so, learning really choreographic elements, depth of field, levels, stillness, movement, all these things. And so we do spend time watching and not just noticing, but like, why is this pulling my focus? What is it about it? And oh, unison. That's not really happening in ensemble because, we don't do unison. It's like, oh, but there's a pleasure there. There's a pleasure there. And so it's a lot of analysis of your own visual system and what your aesthetic is. So that's that kind of makes it different than a lot of other kind of training, because people don't have a defined aesthetic, and so they're improvising without that, and it's kind of helpful to have.
Yeah.
And then contact, it's so interesting. When I arrived in New York, I was not interested in contact. Somebody had shown me in Austin what contact was, and they said, okay, stand there. And they ran and jumped on me and fell down. Jumped on me and fell. I was like, oh, okay. Really not my cup of tea. But I got to New York, and Danny Lepkoff was teaching the first contact class in New York. And I went to one class and went, oh my God, because I was a gym, like a lot of contact dancers. I was a gymnast. I was a diver, jock, track field, swimming. And so I came with quite a developed sense of space. And just, felt totally in love with it. And as I mentioned earlier, when Channel Z got together, we immediately started questioning it, and which was a form of research. And, so, and it was, still relatively new. But one beautiful thing about being in New York at that time is dance was research. So, and none of us knew what was going to happen to contact, and the fact that it is a folk form, which is beautiful. I mean, it's just really beautiful. I think there's some tension. There's some tension between, people that are wanting to push it, whatever that means, and people who are, they practice contact all over the globe, and it's their, social practice. It's therapeutic, and of course, I do contact, and I love that it's therapeutic, but that's not why I do it. So it has all these benefits, but I'm interested in dance making. So, but I love teaching contact. I take this ReWire movement states into it, where it disrupts the contact choreography. And people are like, I'm not choreographed. And I'm like, well, I think you are. Yeah. I mean, this is how we know it's contact. So just, I'm trying to bring creative research into it as a form. And really looking at habits, and habits are good. We have to have habits. But it can get really narrow. I don't have to question contact anymore. I know what it is, and this is it, and I'm doing it. And so I think that's a little bit of a tension between people who, the jams are open, and if you want to do some ensemble work in a jam, it's almost impossible, because everyone's couple dancing, which, takes your spatial focus into this really small little place. I remember I was brought in to teach contact at the Ensemble, the Experimental Theater Wing at NYU. And I think it was just 3 weeks. And at the end of it, they called me in and said, you're not really teaching contact. And I said, well, I am contact. I mean, whoever says they're teaching contact, I mean, it is that. But, obviously. And they meant that I wasn't teaching the tricks, the lifts and all. And I said, well, I don't want to, I'm teaching it conceptually. And it was a conceptual notion in the beginning. The technique didn't come first. The concept came first. And the technique was built from there on out. I don't want people to say they've studied with me and then that say, what's contact? Well, stand there and I'll jump on you. So I taught I continued to teach contact there for many, many years. But Steve Paxton had come down to see Channel Z perform, and we were all going out. And I told him about, my experience at NYU, though. And not to say anything disparaging about the people, but, it was a form that was becoming clarified. And it's like, that's not contact that you're teaching them, because they're not doing the lift over the shoulder. And I said, I relayed that to Steve, and he said, yeah, everybody forgets it's 2 words, contact and improvisation. So, yeah. So, I love it. It's a deep part of my practice. But for dance making, my large goal, it's nice to have some other ideas in the space. And it's, the ensemble thinking, my research has been supported by that community through time. And the people that I was in Poland this summer at pedagogue residency, and we went around in the circle, and there were a lot of experienced people, which I'm really happy. The ensemble thinking work is pulling really professional dancers, or that's kind of a weird word now, professional dancer, as our world is crumbling. But serious research into dance. And quite a few people around said, "Oh, I don't know. I've just had to take a break from contact," or "I just can't. I don't know. I'm just not doing contact right now." And of course, we did contact, but in this kind of new entry point for it, where the ReWire work just messes up all the choreography for contact, but it's really thrilling dancing that's coming out of it. So, but it's interesting, the people that are hungry for this ensemble work, and it's really hard to get in a contact jam, and that's what jam means now. So anyway, it's a good time.
Yeah. For years I was involved. I lived in San Francisco for a little bit, and I got involved with the West Coast Contact Improv Festival that used to happen there, and like in Berkeley and every summer. And I remember we had some long extended conversations about when you have a festival and you have all these classes, and you want some to be open to anyone, and some you want maybe are really offering like fundamentals or beginning kind of stuff. You say experienced or advanced class, what does that even mean?
Yes.
And it can mean like the gymnastic-y kind of stuff, like you have to be ready to do that. But it can also mean that you are incredibly sensitive to touch, and you're really responsive, and like there's all these different ways. And I think it was always a fruitful conversation, but it kind of pointed to different ideas of what we're doing in the content space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and I've worked a little bit with bringing some authentic movement structures with teaching contact improv. So it's like tries to again kind of disrupt some of those habits that we get into. So,
And having that witness is super important, right? That's
yeah. I don't want to take up too much of your time. One thing that you said, I almost want to like do another one and just dig into ReWire, because I remember seeing you perform when I was at the Texas Improv Festival a number of years ago, Dance Improv Festival, and I think the performance was using some of those scores or ideas with the chalk or the charcoal and
Oh,
stuff.
yes. Uh-huh.
So, um, maybe there's that. There's a little bit of that I'm curious about, and then also you at the beginning, right at the beginning of our conversation, there you talked about dance or this practice as nonverbal intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
The connection of ReWire to the brain, and I love the idea of the brain dancing the body and the body dancing the brain, or that back and forth kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's something around those things that you can talk a little bit about, and the kind of the value of nonverbal intelligence and how it shows up in maybe ReWire, but also any of your work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's, I can also, yeah, and I've been lucky because some of my research has been funded here at TCU, and we've done with this group in Austin with quite a few people living with cerebral palsy, and the ReWire work just kind of it scared me and blew my mind, and theirs as well, like when their bodies responded with, if you were having contractures, the bodies just lengthened out and stopped moving, which is a real amazing experience for people that their body's moving all the time. And did pretty deep research with students, and then we took it to a conference at Harvard Medical School, and unfortunately there's too much research in my life, so I've had to kind of like, okay, I'm going to focus on ensemble thinking now, and I'm hoping to get back to the ReWire work. Plus the pandemic came and blew a lot of stuff out of the water. So yeah, I'd love to have a further conversation.
Yeah. So maybe just like to build on that last idea of nonverbal intelligence. Like how do you when you use that? I mean, I have a sense of maybe what I think that means, but I'm curious like what that means for you and
Yeah.
in the work that you do.
And maybe intelligence isn't even the right word, because I think you can think of intelligence as a given. So I don't mean that. So maybe it's just nonverbal knowledge, communication, nonverbal knowledge of nonverbal. So, yeah. So dancers are spatially aware, right? Some more than others. I'm always bumping into people in ballet class when I used to do ballet. But bringing people to understand that they read the world on a pre-conscious level, even, and trying to bring that up into their, front of their brain so that they start understanding how the world that they take for granted or take for, of course, this is the way the world is. Of course, this is logic. Um, and investigate it. Almost, like I'm sure architects have this relationship to space that is really refined compared to your normal person on the street. So yeah, really building your awareness. And I'm working with a Tracy Rocket professor here at the Neely Business School, and she's team management professor. So she working with ensembles in the business world. And it's also the invite being seen, the learning that what you know leadership, following, leading, supporting, leading. You have to develop both. And so I work non-verbally to highlight that what this is leading. This is okay. Oh, okay. You're kind of like me. You want to lead like 100% of the time, and everybody. I got the best idea, for everybody. So you've got to like pull back And if you're a reserved person and I don't want any attention, sorry, you have to have it because we all have to have the shared skills. And you know, I don't know. I've had people, we're all looking at something and somebody comes and stands in front of me and they're shorter than me, so they feel confident that it's an okay action, but they happen to have a really big hairdo. So they're bigger than they actually know or think about, and I'm having to then, try and see, things like that, just getting people in functioning with this awareness of space and how do levels work? The priest, the king is high for a reason. Levels, the power structure in space. You can come into a room and kind of understand the power structure, and that's important, right? As a human being, to be able to be conversant in how we operate non-verbally. And it's a dance. It comes out of dance, but I don't. And of course, in all my work, I don't teach steps, right? I can teach technique class, blah, blah, blah. But it's not about steps. So I'm really trying to open this work up beyond a dance audience and doing some research with that. I'm going to bust the corporate world. And get some pay for dance because it sucks.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, Nina, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It was wonderful to kind of open the door a little bit and get to hear more about your practices and just reconnect.
I'm delighted, and I thank you for doing this because, dance needs this recorded history. So I really appreciate your effort in that.
Thank you.
And I hope our paths cross.
I hope so. I hope they cross again soon. I keep wanting to come back to the Texas Dance Improv Festival. Maybe in the next year or so, I'll be able to do that again. It's always hard because it falls right by NASD and NDO and like all these other things that happen in the fall. So, but I love when I've been there. It's been always so enjoyable. So, but yeah. All right, wonderful.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nina and learned a bit more about her vast explorations into improvisation in so many of its iterations. Please find her in the world, study with her. She is a brilliant and generous soul. Coming up to the last episode of this season of Act React, and it is special and slightly odd in a way. For this episode, I had one of my former students at UW Milwaukee, Megan Holzhauer, who was a research assistant on this podcast and did lots of the legwork of gathering information and links about all the artists I've talked with over the last few months. She's also been working on transcribing a bunch of the conversations from previous seasons. So stay tuned for more information about those. But as her final project for this podcast, she interviewed me. Megan has been in class with me. She's been a cast member in a dance that I created in collaboration with the students for a performance last February. And so I thought it might be interesting to see what someone with her perspective, being in my work recently and one of my students, might ask me. Also, Megan is really just insightful and thoughtful, and I was sure she would do a great job, which she did. So the next episode and the last episode of this season is Megan having a conversation with me about my work as an improvisational artist. But in the meantime, please follow our social media. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, and we've got the Act React profile on Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe. That helps us get out in the world. We've been dropping some video excerpts from previous conversations, as well as some fun and kind of inspiring quotes from people I've had conversations with previously. So stay tuned and keep an eye out for all of those. I look forward to sharing this last episode with you. Until then, live spontaneously.